Pauline Wright, thank you for taking time to speak with Central Coast newspapers. You're a local legal practitioner, but also the president of the New South Wales Council for Civil Liberties. And just last week, you gave out a press release to do with the new police powers in relation to the COVID situation. Can you unpack that for us?
Sure. Look, the New South Wales Council for Civil Liberties is absolutely on board with having properly calibrated temporary measures that are designed to reduce the spread of this deadly pandemic. So there's no argument about that. But what we're concerned about is the overreach and disproportionality of some of the measures. And we're really concerned about the special powers that were announced on the 20th of August because they do represent a bit of overreach. And our position is that any measures that are taken by the police or by the government should be directly proportionate to the risk that we're facing and no more, and they should be temporary.
In the article, other than overreach, you are worried that perhaps the extra powers may in fact undermine the intention of the powers. How does that work?
Well, what happens is that the police have been given really significant new powers on top of the existing powers police have over the citizens of New South Wales. And our view is that trust in police can only be undermined when, rather than providing a public assurance that the additional police powers are not going to be misused, the police commissioner and the deputy commissioner effectively gave a green light to individual officers who may be misusing or improperly using the powers, advising that should they get it wrong, they won't be held to account. Now, that's really alarming when these new powers are going to allow police to enter people's homes without warrant and require people to present to police during compliance checks. It's just the police, whose job it is to know what the rules are, should be held to account if they misuse those powers.
Yes, in the article, you also mentioned the particularly strong powers for those LGAs of concern, as they're called, and as one of the MPs out there called it, a tale of two cities. There seems to be a real a ring around these LGAs.
That's right. So, there's a perception, whether it's justified or not, of the people who live in Western and Southwestern Sydney, that they're bearing the burden of the current crisis and effectively being scapegoated, because what they're feeling is that the police clamp down on them and the defence is out there with them, is really heavy-handed. And the way it's being enforced is heavy-handed compared to the way it was treated in Bondi. Now, that perception may be justified or it may not be, but it's definitely there. And it's only going to be heightened by the new powers that are given and those statements by the police commissioner that if police do overreach, they're not going to be held to account.
It's a remarkable situation. Some of our readers who've lived in eastern parts of Europe previously have contacted the papers with concerns about parallels from those old regimes. Do you see parallels in those powers with a more authoritative form of government?
The measures that we've seen in place in Australia are pretty extreme, and they would ordinarily sit more comfortably in an authoritarian regime rather than a liberal democracy. I'm not saying that the powers have not been necessary, because a lot of them have been. The requirement to isolate when you have the virus is not unreasonable. And nobody would argue that it was. But heavy-handed policing is not going to lead to successful health outcomes. And in fact, it's likely to undermine trust in police and in the government. And that's why we say New South Wales can't arrest its way out of the pandemic. We need sufficient vaccinations being available for those who want them. We need rapid testing being made freely available. And we need properly calibrated, proportionate health directives that are based, that are actually brought in based on evidence that they are going to be effective in battling the pandemic. What we don't want to see is overreach by police.
Do you think, just in closing, do you think that there is a lockdown fatigue, and that some people, as demonstrated in the eastern suburbs and other beachside suburbs, seem to just be flouting the regulations anyway because they are fatigued by it and not entirely convinced by the powers?
I think there is an element of that, but there's also confusion about what the regulations are, because they're, on the one hand, you are allowed to be outdoors for exercise and separately for outdoor recreation. But the police have been fining people for kinds of outdoor recreation, like going somewhere, sitting physically distanced from others, drinking a coffee. People are getting $1,000 fines for doing that. And yet on the New South Wales government website, that's permissible. So there's real confusion around it too. It's not just that people are flouting it or that they're getting fatigued. They are genuinely confused about what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do.
Has there been any cases in the courts of people taking these fines to court that you're aware of?
Not yet. What people are seeking to do, and what I would encourage them to do, is to write to the, when you get the fine letter, there's an address that you write to if you want to dispute the fine. I would recommend that everybody does do that, and maybe even get legal advice. Some of the legal centres are prepared to do that pro bono. Get some legal advice, draft a letter to say, look, the website says that this is permissible, and the police have fined me and I want my fine to be overturned. So I would recommend that people do that. We're calling on the government to, in fact, do a blanket removal of those fines, to reverse those fines where they have been issued on people who are engaging in outdoor recreation that is permissible as per the government's website.
Right. Well, thank you, Pauline. Hopefully these special powers will fade away in the near future and we can get back to some form of normalcy. I'm sure we might have a chat with you again.
I'm pretty sure we're going to see that, Dave. It's as more and more people get vaccinated, with vaccinations becoming freely available, because not everybody's been able to get them yet. People who want them haven't been able to get them. But once that happens, it's going to be a different place by Christmas, is my prediction.
However, for those people who choose for one reason or other not to be vaccinated, how can this possibly work when who's going to control and how are they going to control who's vaccinated, and therefore if they have the law is broken or not? How could that possibly work?
Well, there are some people, for a start, who can't be vaccinated because they might be immunocompromised, and it can cause concern for those particular individuals. So for them, that's why you need an alternative way of being able to be free in the community, and that is rapid testing. So if you can prove either that you've been fully vaccinated or that you are COVID-free, you should be able to move freely and go about your lawful business just like everyone else.
Or indeed, I suppose, if you have had the virus and have some antigens to it, perhaps.
Well, potentially, but I think the main thing is that you be able to establish, while we've still got this, it is a deadly pandemic. Let's not beat around the bush. while that deadly pandemic is still around, we do need to accept that there are going to be some limits, and we're going to have to show that we've got a license to go about our business. Just like at the moment, we've got to have a license to drive. This is a license to mix,
Right.
just for now. It's got to be temporary, but while we've still got the pandemic being deadly, then proof of vaccination or proof of COVID negative is not unreasonable.
All right. Well, thanks for speaking with Central Coast Newspapers.
Pleasure. Thanks, Dave.
Okay.